The mysterious encounter on the alien world of Verith, where towering spires of metal and glass pierced the clouds. The Verithian queen ruled with unquestioned authority. Her species had conquered planets, shattered civilizations, and explored the furthest reaches of the galaxy. Yet despite their extraordinary intelligence and technological superiority, they had never encountered a race like humans. The queen was a being of immense intellect, known throughout the galaxy for her calculating mind and strategic genius. She had led her people for centuries and had learned everything about the universe and its vast array of creatures. To her, emotions were a weakness, a trait that hindered true power. The concept of climax, which many other species had spoken of, was something she dismissed as nothing more than a myth. A story created by primitive races to explain human emotion and physicality. However, that was about to change. A delegation of human prisoners had been captured during a skirmish at the edge of Verithian space. The queen had ordered their detention not as a punishment, but as an opportunity to study them. After all, these humans had never been seen by her people up close. They had a reputation for being resourceful and strong, but the queen saw them as no more than a primitive species unworthy of her attention. Among the prisoners was a human male, one named John, who was different from the others. His arrival had been as routine as any other, but there was something about him that the queen could not ignore. He was not like the rest of the humans she had encountered in her long life. His demeanor was calm, composed, and his eyes held an intensity that intrigued her. He was placed in a cell, awaiting interrogation, yet the queen found herself drawn to him in a way that was entirely foreign to her. The queen had never thought of humans as anything more than a tool. They were nothing more than a subject to study, a puzzle to solve. But as she looked at John from the control room, she could sense a strange energy emanating from him. His calm presence seemed to defy the cold, calculated world of the Verithian Empire. "Prepare the prisoner for the interrogation," the queen ordered with a voice that echoed across the vast chamber. The cold, emotionless tone of her voice contrasted sharply with the storm of curiosity that brewed within her. This was no ordinary prisoner. John was not simply another specimen to be examined. He was different, and the queen needed to understand why. As the guards led John into the interrogation chamber, the queen's mind raced. What was it about him that unsettled her so? She had interrogated countless beings from every corner of the galaxy, but none had made her feel this way. Perhaps it was his calmness. Perhaps it was the fire in his eyes that told her he was not afraid. John was led into the room, where the queen sat in her high chair, looking down at him. Her gaze was piercing, but John did not flinch. In fact, he met her eyes directly, his posture relaxed yet confident. "You are human," the queen began, her voice dripping with disdain. "I have studied your kind for centuries. You are weak, primitive, and lacking in any true strength. But something about you interests me. Tell me, what makes you think you are different from the others?" John's lips curled into a faint smile, and for a brief moment, the queen thought she saw something more in him. Was it arrogance? Or was it something else entirely? But she quickly pushed that thought aside. This was no time for distractions. "I think you'll find, Queen," John said calmly, his voice steady, "that we're not as weak as you think. I've survived things that would break any other species. We have strength, yes, but we also have something more. Something that sets us apart." The queen raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice still cold, but with an underlying curiosity. John leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "You'll have to experience it for yourself. I can tell you about it all day, but unless you understand it, you won't believe it." The queen was silent for a moment, studying him. Was this some kind of trick? Was he trying to manipulate her? Or was there some truth to his words? She had always prided herself on her ability to understand beings, to see through their lies. But John's words were unlike anything she had heard before. There was no arrogance in his voice, no defiance. Just an earnestness that was difficult to ignore. "You humans have a concept," the Queen said, her tone turning more thoughtful. "You speak of something called a climax. It is a term I've heard among other races, but it is nothing. More than a myth, a story created to explain your feeble attempts at connection. Tell me, John, do you truly believe in this concept?" John's smile widened, and for the first time, the Queen saw a glimmer of warmth in his eyes. "I don't. Just believe in it." "I live it," he replied softly. The Queen's mind was racing. This human, this John, was different from the others she had encountered. His words carried weight, and there was an energy about him that was undeniable. But what was this climax that he spoke of? How could something so deeply emotional hold such power? The Queen's curiosity got the better of her. "Prove it," she commanded. "Show me this climax you speak of. If it is real, then I will believe you." John's expression softened, and he nodded slowly. He had no idea what the Queen was expecting, but he knew that this was an opportunity. An opportunity to show her something beyond her cold, calculated world. He was about to embark on a journey that would change not just the Queen, but the entire Verithian Empire forever, and so the stage was set. The Queen had asked for proof, and John would give it to her. But little did she know, she was about to discover something that would shake the very foundation of her beliefs, the human strength. Verithian Queen stood in her chamber, her thoughts swirling like the storm outside the palace windows. She had asked for proof, a demonstration of this mysterious concept of climax that the human male, John, had spoken about. The idea was preposterous. Yet, a small, curious part of her couldn't shake the nagging feeling that perhaps she had been wrong about humans. John, meanwhile, was led to a secluded training arena deep within the palace grounds. The arena, usually reserved for the Verithian elite to demonstrate their combat skills, was now the stage for an unexpected confrontation. The Queen watched from above, hidden behind an energy shield, as she prepared herself to witness the human male's alleged climax. The air in the arena was thick with tension. John stood in the center, his face calm, yet his eyes held a fire that would not be extinguished. He was alone, with only the Queen observing from the shadows. There were no weapons, no artificial barriers to protect him. Only his body, his strength, and his will. The Queen had ordered the arena to be empty, with no distractions or interferences. She had a singular goal in mind, to see if the human could truly demonstrate what he had described. She had learned to distrust anything that seemed illogical or out of place. And yet, John's words had created a ripple in her understanding of the universe. John knew this would not be easy. He wasn't sure what the Queen expected, but he understood. One thing, he was about to push himself beyond any limit he had ever known. He could feel her presence above him, watching his every move. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was a test subject, the first human to face the Queen's scrutiny on such a personal level. Without a word, he started moving. His body, though, not as large as the Verithians, was conditioned by years of struggle and survival. His movements were fluid and precise, each step calculated, but not robotic. He could feel his muscles stretch and tense with each action. He wasn't just using strength. He was using something deeper, something that he had no words for. The Queen observed closely, her eyes narrowing. She had seen countless beings demonstrate their strength in battle. But there was something about John's movements that was different. It wasn't the raw power of a Verithian warrior, but there was a grace, a precision to it that she couldn't quite understand. It was as if his body and mind were perfectly aligned, working together in a way that was beyond what she had encountered before. She saw him take a deep breath, his chest rising and falling slowly. His focus was intense, and for the first time since their encounter, the Queen felt a slight flutter of uncertainty. She had always been in control, always been the one who held the power. But here, in this arena, she was the one who was unsure. John began to pick up the pace. He wasn't trying to impress her with flashy moves or over-the-top feats. He was simply moving, pushing himself to the limit, exploring his body's capacity for endurance, for strength, and for feeling. It was more than just physical exertion. It was an emotional release, an expression of everything he had ever endured. Queen couldn't help but feel a strange stirring inside her. She had seen strength before, seen combatants tear through enemies with sheer power. But John was different. He wasn't fighting anyone. He was fighting himself, testing his own limits, reaching for something beyond mere survival. She had never seen anything like it. The Verithians were a species of intellect and strategy, but they had never needed to rely on something as unpredictable as emotion. And yet, as she watched John, she felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before. A rush, a stirring. Within her chest, something that went beyond curiosity. John pushed on, his sweat pouring down his face, but his resolve never wavered. He wasn't sure what the Queen was looking for, but he knew this was his only chance to show her the depth of humanity's strength. It wasn't just in their ability to fight, to endure, or to conquer. It was in their ability to connect with one another, to feel, to experience life fully and without reservation. He stopped for a moment, his breath coming in heavy gasps. The arena was silent, save for the sound of his own heartbeat. He looked up at the Queen, though she couldn't see his eyes from her vantage point. But he could feel her presence, her watchful gaze upon him. John knew the Queen was trying to analyze him, trying to understand what made humans different. But what she didn't realize was that it wasn't something that could be explained in logical terms. It wasn't something that could be seen through the lens of intellect. It was something that had to be experienced, something that had to be felt in the heart. And so he began again, this time moving with even greater intensity. His body ached, every muscle screamed for rest, but he ignored it. He wasn't here to rest. He was here to show the Queen what it meant to be human. To show her that their strength wasn't just in their physical power, but in their ability to push through pain, to rise after every fall, and to keep moving forward, no matter the cost. The Queen watched in silence, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. She had never seen a being so determined, so willing to push themselves beyond their limits. The humans were primitive, they were weak, and yet, in this moment, they seemed to embody something that even the Verithians could not understand. It was not just their strength that fascinated her. It was their ability to feel, to experience emotions so deeply that it shaped every part of their existence. The Queen had never allowed herself to experience emotions in such a raw, unfiltered way. But as she watched John, she began to wonder if she had been wrong all along. Could this be the key to understanding what she had been missing all her life? Was there something more to life than intellect, than control? Was there a deeper truth, one that even the Verithians had overlooked? John collapsed to his knees, breathless and exhausted, but with a look of satisfaction on his face. He had given everything he had, and in that moment, he knew he had done more than simply prove his strength. He had shown the Queen something far more important, the power of the human spirit, the strength that came not from the body, but from the heart. The Queen stood silent, her thoughts racing. She had witnessed something incredible, something that defied logic and reason. And she knew, deep down, that she would never look at humanity the same way again. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments, or if you'd like to move on to the next part, you said. Part 3, 1,000 words Kaleko, or interesting. Huna Chea, or third-person style Ma Lakaniha, or simple basic English ka use karna high dot or underline ChatGPT said. Part 3, the test. The Queen stared down at John, who was now on his knees, breathing heavily, sweat pouring down his face. He had pushed himself to the edge, to a place where his body could not go any further. But still, there was something in his eyes of fire that refused to be extinguished. The queen had never seen a being so determined, so willing to sacrifice everything for something she couldn't quite understand. She could feel the stirrings of something deep within her chest. This was not just curiosity anymore. It was something more, a feeling she had long since buried under layers of logic and intellect. But now it had resurfaced, and she didn't know how to control it. John stood slowly, wiping the sweat from his brow. He felt the pain in his muscles, the exhaustion in every fiber of his body, but he also felt something else. Something deeper. Something that had been buried beneath the hardships of his life. He had given everything, and in that moment, he realized that it wasn't just about proving his strength to the queen. It was about showing her the truth that humans could feel, could connect in ways that even the most advanced species could not comprehend. The queen's voice broke the silence, cold and calculating as ever. You have shown me strength, but I still do not understand. You humans speak of the climax, an experience that is supposed to transcend all others. But I have seen no evidence of it. You have merely exhausted yourself. There is no transformation, no grand revelation. What makes this so special? John looked up at her, his eyes unwavering. You don't understand because you're looking for it in the wrong place, he said softly. This isn't something you can just study and analyze. It's something you have to experience. You have to feel it. The queen narrowed her eyes. You want me to feel it? She asked, her voice filled with skepticism. John nodded. Yes, it's not just about physical strength. It's about connection. It's about pushing beyond your limits and finding something deeper inside yourself. You have to let go of the control that you're used to. You have to surrender to it. The queen's heart raced, though she would never admit it. She had always prided herself on her control, on being the master of her emotions, her thoughts, and her actions. But here, in the presence of this human, she felt something that was beyond her control. Something that made her question everything she thought she knew about strength and power. Then show me, she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a hint of uncertainty. John nodded. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. He wasn't sure what the queen was expecting, but he knew that he couldn't just tell her about the climax. He had to show her. But how could he make her understand something so deeply human when she had never allowed herself to experience it? He stepped forward, closer to the queen, his eyes locking with hers. I'm not just talking about physical exertion, he said. I'm talking about a connection, a bond, something that happens when two beings are willing to lay everything bare, to trust each other completely. The queen stood still, watching him, her mind racing. She had no idea what John was trying to say, but his words stirred something inside her, a feeling she could not dismiss. It was as if he were offering her something she had never even considered, the possibility of vulnerability. You want me to trust you? The queen asked, her voice low and challenging. John nodded again. Yes, it's the only way to truly understand. For a moment, there was silence. The queen stood motionless, her eyes locked on John. She could feel her walls, the barriers she had spent centuries building, beginning to crack. She had never allowed herself to trust anyone, not even her own people. Control had always been her shield, her weapon. But now, with John standing before her, she felt something new, a vulnerability that made her question her own strength. Do you understand now? John asked, his voice gentle but firm. The queen didn't know how to answer. She had never been in a position where she needed to let go, to surrender to something outside her control. But as she looked at John, she realized that perhaps this was the key. Perhaps this was what she had been missing all along. Her voice, when it came, was almost a whisper. I do not understand, she admitted. But I am willing to learn. John smiled softly. He had known it wouldn't be easy. The queen was not like any other being he had ever encountered. Her mind was sharp, her control absolute. But beneath all that, he had seen the flicker of something else, a curiosity, a desire to understand. "Then let me show you," he said, "but it's not something you can control. You have to let go of the need for power, for control. You have to trust that the connection will guide you." The queen looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of deception. But there was nothing. John's expression was calm, sincere, and for the first time, the queen felt the weight of her own walls beginning to crumble. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Her gaze never left his as she took a deep breath, allowing herself to be vulnerable, to let go of the control she had always relied on. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. And for the first time in her life, the queen realized that she didn't have to be in control all the time. John reached out, his hand resting gently on hers. The touch was soft, but it sent a wave of warmth through the queen's body. She could feel something shifting, something deep within her. It was not just physical, it was emotional. It was a connection that she had never allowed herself to experience before. And then, she felt it. A surge of energy, of warmth, of understanding. It was as if everything she had ever known, the cold, the control, the logic, suddenly melted away, leaving only a raw, unfiltered connection between herself and John. For a brief moment, the queen understood what John had been trying to show her. The climax wasn't just a myth, a story, it was real. It was a transformative experience that transcended the physical realm and reached into the heart, into the soul. John's eyes met hers, and for the first time, the queen saw him not as a prisoner, but as a being of equal worth. They were connected in a way that defied logic, that defied everything she had ever known. In that moment, the queen knew that this was only the beginning. There was so much more to learn, so much more to feel. And she had John to thank for it. The revelation. The queen stood still, her heart pounding in her chest as the warmth from John's touch lingered. The connection she had felt was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was raw, real, and powerful. For the first time in her life, she felt truly vulnerable, and it terrified her. She had built her empire on control, on intellect, and on being the one who always held the power. Yet here she was, standing in front of a human male, feeling something she couldn't explain. John took a step back, his hand still gently resting in hers. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, the uncertainty. She wasn't sure what had just happened, but he could see that she was starting to understand. It wasn't just about physical strength. It wasn't about logic or intellect. It was about something deeper, something that connected all living beings, regardless of their species. "I know this is hard for you to understand," John said quietly, his voice steady and calm. "But this is the human way. We don't just rely on logic or brute strength. We rely on our emotions, on our connections with others. That's what makes us strong." The queen's eyes flickered with something almost resembling confusion. She had never allowed herself to feel these things. She had always seen emotions as weaknesses, something that clouded judgment and undermined power. But now, standing in front of John, she realized that emotions were not a weakness. They were a source of strength, a force that could be harnessed to create something more powerful than anything she had ever known. You truly believe that emotions are a source of strength?" the queen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what makes your kind different." John nodded. "Yes, emotions drive us to do things we never thought possible. They give us the courage to fight when we're afraid, to love when it seems impossible, and to push through pain when we want to give up. It's what makes us human." The queen felt her heart race as his words sank in. She had spent her entire life suppressing her emotions, believing that they would only get in the way of her goals. But now she couldn't deny it. She had felt something in that moment, something that made her question everything she had ever known. For the first time in her life, the queen felt a sense of doubt creeping into her mind. Was her entire worldview wrong? Could it be that the Verithians, in their pursuit of intellect and control, had missed something fundamental about existence. Was there more to strength than just logic and power? John's voice broke through her thoughts. It's not just about physical strength. It's about finding something inside yourself, something that connects you to others, to the world around. That's what makes the human experience so unique. The Queen looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of deception. But there was none. John's sincerity was palpable, and she felt an undeniable pull towards him. The walls she had so carefully constructed over centuries of leadership and control began to crumble. She was no longer the ruler of an empire. She was just a being, standing before another being, struggling to understand something that defied all logic. I don't know what to do with this, the Queen confessed, her voice soft, almost fragile. I've never allowed myself to feel this way before. I've always believed that emotions were a weakness, something to be controlled, something to be avoided. John smiled gently. I know, but you don't have to control everything. You can still be powerful, still be strong, but you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to shut yourself off from others. The Queen closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had always been alone in her quest for power, never allowing anyone to get close enough to see the real her. But now, standing here, with John's words echoing, in her mind, she felt the possibility of something different. Something more. She opened her eyes and looked at him, her gaze filled with uncertainty, but also a growing sense of understanding. Is it really possible? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Can I truly change? Can I learn to feel, to connect with others in the way you describe? John nodded again, his expression kind and reassuring. Yes, it's not easy. But it's possible. The first step is to let go of the need for control. The second step is to trust. Trust yourself and trust the people around you. The Queen took a deep breath, her mind racing. Could she really change? Could she, the ruler of an empire, the leader of a species that prided itself on control and logic, learn to embrace something as unpredictable as emotions? It seemed impossible, yet as she stood there, with John's calm presence beside her, she felt something stirring within her. For the first time in her life, the Queen realized that she didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to control everything. She could be powerful without sacrificing her humanity, without shutting herself off from others. The Queen stepped back, her eyes still locked on John's. I need time, she said, her voice soft but filled with determination. This is all so new to me, but I am willing to try. John smiled, his expression full of warmth and understanding. That's all anyone can do, he said. Take it one step at a time. You don't have to have all the answers right away. The Queen nodded, a small sense of peace settling over her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. She had spent so long building walls, so long suppressing everything that made her human. But now, those walls were starting to crumble, and she was beginning to understand that there was more to life than just power and control. As the Queen turned to leave the arena, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. She didn't know what would come next, but she was no longer afraid. For the first time in her life, she was open to the possibility of change, and that was the most powerful feeling she had ever known. A new understanding. The days following the Queen's encounter with John were filled with turmoil, both for her and for the Verithian Empire. She had spent a lifetime shaping her mind and her people to follow a strict set of beliefs. Now, with a single human male, her entire worldview had begun to shift. She had felt something deep inside that she could not explain. And it terrified her. But it also left her with a sense of possibility, a possibility she had never considered before. John's words echoed in her mind constantly. It's not just about strength, it's about connection. How could something as intangible as emotion hold such power? How could it make her feel more alive, more human than she had ever felt before? The Queen was used to controlling everything. She had never been vulnerable. But now, she was beginning to see that perhaps the strength she had relied on for so long wasn't the only kind of strength there was. One evening, as the sun set behind the towering spires of the Verithian capital, the Queen stood alone on the balcony of her palace. The breeze gently ruffled her robes, but she paid it no mind. Her thoughts were far away, lost in the whirl of emotions and confusion that had taken hold of her. She had spent centuries building her empire on the foundation of intellect, cold, calculation, and complete control. But now she wasn't sure what her empire was built on. She wasn't sure what she was built on. The door behind her opened softly, and John stepped out, his presence calm and steady, as always. He had not spoken much since their last meeting, but the Queen could feel his eyes on her, watching her, waiting for her to make sense of the turmoil within her. For a moment, they stood in silence, both of them caught in their own thoughts. Finally, the Queen spoke. "I don't know what to do anymore," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything I've believed in, everything I've KNOWN, it's all starting to feel like a lie." John took a step forward, his voice gentle. "It's not a lie. It's just not the whole truth. There's more to life than what you've known. More than control, more than power." The Queen turned to face him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But I've spent so long in control. It's who I am. How can I just let go of that? How can I trust what I feel when it goes against everything I've ever known?" John smiled softly. "Letting go doesn't mean losing yourself. It means growing. You can still be powerful, but you don't have to be cold. You can still lead, but you don't have to be alone." The Queen looked down, her mind racing. She had always prided herself on her strength, on the control she had over every situation, every decision. But now she was beginning to wonder if that strength was really the key to everything. What if she had been wrong? What if there was another way to lead? A way that didn't require her to shut out the feelings that were so clearly stirring within her. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the breeze once more. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable, to let her guard down. The walls she had spent centuries building began to crumble, piece by piece. She had spent so long hiding from her own emotions, from the possibility of connection. But now she was starting to see that connection wasn't a weakness. It was what made her stronger. "I've been so afraid," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Afraid to feel, to connect. Afraid that if I did, I would lose everything I've worked for." "You haven't lost anything," John replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "You're not losing your power. You're finding a new kind of power, one that's even stronger than the control you've always relied on." The Queen met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. She wasn't sure if she was ready to completely change everything she had ever known. But in that moment, she knew she couldn't go back. The feelings she had experienced, the connections she had begun to understand, were not something she could ignore. They were a part of her now, and they were something she would have to embrace if she ever hoped to truly understand the human experience. "I don't know how to do this," the Queen said quietly. "How do I lead with my heart when all I've ever known is leading with my mind?" John stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. It's a journey, but the first step is to trust yourself. Trust what you're feeling. You don't have to control everything, not anymore." The Queen felt a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't alone in her struggles. She had always believed that she had to carry the weight of the empire on her shoulders by herself, that she had to be strong enough to hold it all together. But now she realized that she didn't have to do it alone. She had John, and perhaps for the first time, she could allow herself to lean on him. Not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as a fellow being who was learning and growing alongside her. The queen looked out over her empire, her heart filled with a strange mixture of fear and hope. She had come so far, built so much, but now she was beginning to realize that there was more to life than the empire. There was more to power than control. And she was starting to understand that the true strength came not from ruling over others, but from connecting with them, from understanding them. She took a deep breath and turned back to John, her eyes filled with determination. "I don't know exactly where this journey will take me," she said, her voice steady, "but I'm ready to take the first step." John smiled, his expression full of pride. "That's all anyone can do. Take it one step at a time." The queen stood tall, feeling a new sense of strength rising within her. It wasn't the kind of strength she had once relied on, cold, unfeeling, and controlled. It was a new kind of strength, one that came from her heart, from her willingness to connect, to feel, and to trust. And in that moment, she knew that she was no longer just the ruler of an empire. She was a part of something much bigger, something that could change not only her world, but the entire galaxy.